Resident Evil 4 might be the best Resident Evil game since Resident Evil 4. Wait, what? It's a bit confusing that half the main series has 2 versions of the same game, but hey, these remakes are great for the most part. Except for the most part. I wasn't surprised when Capcom announced an Ori 4 remake due to Ori 2 and Ori 3 remake, and also because the original Ori 4 is so popular amongst the fandom that I'd be surprised if they didn't remake it. The original Resident Evil 4 is such a cash cow for Capcom. Now they can add this remake to the long list of releases this game has had. No, like seriously, look it up, it's crazy. There's like 15 versions of this game out there. I was worried that this remake wouldn't live up to the original. Capcom's remakes are kind of all over the place. Resident Evil 1 Remake completely invalidates the original game. There's no reason to go back and play the original PS1 version, as the remake improves upon everything from the original. It's the definitive experience. Also, it looks phenomenal. Ori 2 Remake is a great game, but it did cut out some things and messed up the scenarios, so I'd say it's on par with the original. I'd recommend you experience both. Ori 3 Remake, however, dropped the ball hard. Way too much cut content, boring scripted sequences, and a sorry excuse of Nemesis, which makes this vastly inferior to the original game. I was expecting Ori 4 Remake to fall somewhere in the middle, not amazing, but not terrible. How could a remake hold a candle to the iconic original? Well, after many, and I mean many playthroughs, I can safely say this game is great. But is it on par or better than the original? Well, let's find out.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
He said the line! Well, since this is a remake, there hasn't been a significant change to the story. Leon is still a government agent that is tasked with finding the president's daughter Ashley in a rural part of Spain. The major plot beats are still here, although with a slightly more serious edge to them. The game is still cheesy, and I love it, but some iconic lines have been cut. Some I can understand due to the more serious direction, but come on Capcom, you couldn't have kept the "your right hand comes off" line in? There's a lot more background and lore given to the cast and setting. I like this as it gave the world you were exploring more character, and the characters themselves felt more three-dimensional. Whether or not that makes them more memorable, well, I'll get to that later. The pacing is a bit more consistent than the original. Before, the village would go perfectly fine, while the castle always went on a bit too long, and then you'll probably feel a bit tired by the time you get to the island. I personally never felt this way, but I know a lot of people that did. The remake cuts down sections mostly from the castle and island, which makes them go by quicker. I like the new game's pacing, but I will admit that it sucks that some parts were cut. It's up to you if you feel like this flows better than before. They both take around the same time to beat regardless, but that's because Capcom expanded a lot of different elements to extend the length. Now when it comes to the gameplay, the game has 4 difficulties: Assisted, Standard, Hardcore and Professional. And let me tell you that this sentence is a complete lie. I've played the original game so many times, I know exactly how it plays. This remake doesn't play like the original at all. This isn't a bad thing for the remake, it just took me a few hours and many deaths to wrap my head around the new gameplay loop. Oh, I'm just dead. Oh, Jesus. I'm paged. Shit. Offer. Where did those dynamites come from? Can I catch a break? Oh my god, I keep dying. Fucking Capcom gaslighting me. Gunplay is significantly faster in the remake. Since Leon can move and shoot, enemies are way more aggressive as a result. In the original, Leon could not move and shoot, so enemy AI was worked around that, and they would slow down when close to Leon. Not in the remake, they don't give a shit. You have to be way more aware of your surroundings, which does add tension. Ganados still attack in a similar way to the original, besides for the increased movement. They will attack in groups usually, use melee weapons to hurt you, and will throw them at you. They will grab you if they have no weapon. Shooting them stuns them and leaves them open for a room-clearing melee attack. These are still great, and yes, you can still suplex Ganados. Yes! Nothing gives me more pleasure than suplexing a random farmer. Enemy variety is solid too. Most of the original enemies return, with a few new ones. A few were cut, but it wasn't much of a loss. Some enemies are way more fun to fight here than the original. For example, Gardeors are way harder to fight due to their small weak spot, but I enjoyed the encounters with them a lot more here, because I had more mobility. Novicidors are better too, due to Leon's increased movement. They also aren't as bullet spongy, thank god. They're one of the worst enemies in the original, to be honest. There weren't any enemies that I outright hated. Some even have new abilities which took me by surprise. This is a welcome change of pace that felt like it made sense in the world of the game. Now in terms of what weapons you'll be using to kill these enemies, the variety is great. Most of the original weapons return and still kick ass. Red 9 is still my baby, but I liked using the other pistols too, as they have their own uses in combat. I'm glad to see shotguns still feel fantastic to use. I know a Resident Evil game is at least good if they nail the shotgun. They're all good, but I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I prefer the riot gun over the striker. The riot gun was always a solid shotgun in the original, but the striker cleaned house in every encounter. The large ammo supply and high damage made it a force to be reckoned with. The striker is kind of downgraded here. It still has a large ammo supply, but the range and damage is worse. It's best used to clear a bunch of enemies that are right in front of you, and I mean right in front of you. Otherwise it won't hit jack shit. The riot gun might have a smaller ammo count, but it has far better range, a good fire rate, it's surprisingly accurate and delivers devastating damage, making it the best shotgun in the game for me. The two snipers we have are good, although the first sniper is pretty shit until you upgrade it, while the second one is way more viable for a longer period of time. The TMP is, well, the TMP. Nothing says fuck off more than continuously sustained counterfire. They added a new SMG as well, that is just a bootleg MP5, which is solid enough, but I think I prefer my old reliable. A new assault rifle was added too, but I never used it as it never fitted my own style, but I have heard people say it has its own uses, so go crazy with it if you want. The magnums are still overpowered as shit, but the broken butterfly has a serious problem of not being able to hit anything that isn't within 5 feet of it. I hate how inaccurate it is despite the fact that it hits like a truck. I know it's a balancing thing, but it still just kind of feels unfair because it has so little ammo to begin with. So like it just kind of feels unfair when you miss a shot that's like right in front of you. You line it up properly and you still miss. The Killer 7 is the go-to magnum when it's available. Its better accuracy invalidates the broken butterfly. They rewrote the mine launcher to be the bolt thrower, and after an initial shit first encounter with it, I thought it was pretty cool when used properly. Fully upgrading it makes it really effective on future playthroughs when you know where enemies spawn. Overall, a great selection of weapons. Now here's something I never thought I would need in a Resident Evil game. Parrying! Yes, you can parry in this game, and this makes combat fundamentally better because of it. Your knife can parry enemies at the last second, which can be followed by a counterattack, and I fell in love with it. Dark Souls fans, rejoice. The knife can't do this forever though, as it has durability, which means that the knife will break and need to be repaired. The knife and its durability adds a whole new dimension to combat, as now you actually have to pay attention to your only defensive option. It can get you out of a grab instantly at the cost of durability. I like that it can be used offensively or defensively. A nice mix-up as it makes the knife more fun to use than the original variant. Parry this, you filthy casuals. Ashley has had some changes made to her behaviour. Now Ashley always follows you, but you can tell her to stay back or stick close to you. She also doesn't have a health bar to manage, although she will be incapacitated if she gets hit. You have to revive her or risk her being killed or kidnapped. Now Ashley's behaviour has its ups and downs. It is great to not have to manage her health anymore, and when you're playing the game normally and on a difficulty like standard or hardcore, she's mostly fine to manage. But when playing on professional, or when you're trying to beat the game as quickly as possible, she can become quite annoying. The reason is that they try to make her AI way smarter than necessary. In the original, she would always stay behind Leon at all times when moving. You can tell her to stop anytime you want, and if she gets in the way during a fight, she will duck to avoid getting in the way. Anytime she got kidnapped, it was because of your own actions, not because of the game. It felt fair and her AI was simple and straightforward. In the remake, however, they try to give her way too much freedom. Instead, she would run around like a headless chicken and get kidnapped on a regular basis. Most combat counters would have Ashley getting kidnapped at least once. She never consistently follows behind you, and it's kind of funny and ridiculous how much distance you can get away from her. She also gets in the way on numerous occasions when fighting, which definitely annoyed me more than once. I'm harping on about this because I feel like the original AI was perfect and didn't need changing. She's fine here and it won't ruin the experience, but it's a slight downgrade from the original. I'll go more into her character later. Now we get to talk about the sexiest person in this game. The merchant makes a glorious return in this remake. He serves the same role as before. He sells you guns, attachments, health items, and even crafting recipes and resources for your new crafting system in the game. I really liked the crafting system. It added a whole new dimension to combat as now you have to choose which ammo to prioritize. Back to the merchant though. He still has that mysterious and charming personality from the original, although with a slightly different accent.
Stranger!
This dialogue is very funny and memorable. He might speak a bit too much for some, but I didn't mind. A new mechanic in the game is the merchant's quests. Sometimes you'll find orders from the merchant to do a quest for him. Sometimes it's something small, like sell him a fish or an egg, something small like that. But the coolest quest he gives you is making you fight optional bosses for big rewards. These rewards can usually come as gems, which can be combined with treasures to sell for a high price. Great little system, by the way. Very fun to mess around with and manage different gems into different treasures. It adds more layers, man. Other rewards you get are spinels, which act as a different currency and can be traded for specific rewards like guns, resources, treasure maps, etc. The shooting range returns, but updated. There's different challenges with different guns that give you coins to spend on random rewards. I really enjoyed this minigame, so much so that I spent way too much time trying to get 100% on it. The rewards can give you a lot of cool different bonuses. For example, you might get bonus magnum ammo when crafting, stuff like that. It's a very enjoyable experience, especially when you have a companion along to watch. All these new additions are very welcome, and I really enjoy doing extra side quests to bolster my inventory. The merchant is perfect. Perfect, down to the last minute detail. Puzzles are better here than the original. Bar a couple of puzzles in the OG, none really stuck out as hard or thought-provoking. Now, I'm not saying the puzzles in the remake are difficult head-scratchers, although I spent an embarrassingly long time on a couple. I'm just stupid. They definitely added a bit more depth to exploration and made you think a bit. Nothing much else to add here, just a solid overall improvement. The boss roster on display in the remake is a solid bunch. The majority were fun to fight and are on par or even better than their original counterparts. Del Lago is the first major boss fight. I was never overly fond of the original fight, as it was just a standard on-rails fight, and it's a similar affair here, although it always goes the same direction every playthrough, which makes it very predictable. The original had it change direction to keep you on your toes, so even though it was on rails, you couldn't always predict it. You also can't get knocked out of your boat, which added a lot of tension in the original fight. Here you're always stuck on the boat. The fight in the remake is fine. El Gigante, aka El Thickboy, is still a great boss fight. It functions almost identical to the original. The boss gets bonus points for having an epic entrance for the best doggo ever. The doggo! Mendez is on par with the original. He operates the same for his first phase, but they changed it on his second phase to be a bit more distant while attacking you, and his attacks can be harder to dodge. A good change, and it keeps players on their toes. Verdugo is pretty much the exact same, which is a good thing, so not much to say here, although there isn't a cutscene setting up the fight, it just comes as a surprise. Not too bothered by the change, but I thought I would at least mention it. Salazar is alright. His original fight was fine enough, although it was a bit of a pushover since he was stationary. It feels like Capcom overcorrected the boss here. Now he's very fast and agile and is an absolute bullet sponge. There's an extremely small window of opportunity to hurt him, and a lot of his moves are difficult to dodge, making it a frustrating fight. I died at least 3 times when I first fought him, and his repeating dialogue got on my nerves after a while. However, players discovered that he's allergic to eggs of all things. You probably heard about this, but if you throw a golden egg at him, he loses around 70% of his health, which makes him a joke when followed up with a magnum. I do this every time I get to this part. It saves me the frustration. Krauser actually gets 2 boss fights here. The first is the knife fight, but this time it's in gameplay. Now I'm actually a fan of the QTE fight from the original, as the QTEs were so fast and added a lot of tension, but I will admit that it's really cool to do this fight in gameplay instead of a cutscene. The parry system works really well for this fight. I really like both, they're on par with each other. His second fight might be better than the original, as the new movement and parry mechanics are used well in the fight. Trying to avoid traps and making sure to parry his attacks with your knife was a challenging but fair fight. I think the layout of the course is designed better too. His final phase was a nice way to cap off this part of the game, an overall improvement to the original. Sadler's fight is on par when comparing both versions. I was never a huge fan of the original fight, and I can say the same here. It's fine. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed myself, I just wasn't blown away. Bar a few low points, the boss fights are great. And remember, you can always end a fight early with a trusty rocket launcher. The story in the remake is definitely an improvement, although that wasn't exactly a high bar in the first place. Like I said before, it's a bit more serious and less cheesy, but the cheese isn't completely gone. There's still a good few moments left intact.
Hasta luego.
I like how we get more insight into the Los Illuminados cult and its villains, and there's a few details and Easter eggs that expand the lore of the overall universe. In terms of the characters, they range from to great. Starting with my boy Leon, he's really great here. I like how his character has progressed since Resident Evil 2 Remake. It feels more connected than the original version. He's not as action hero as before, but he still has that dorky cheesy hero vibe throughout the game, which feels consistent with his character from the second one. The actor, Nick Apostolidis, sells the cheesy lines and even has some original ones which I liked a lot.
God damn. That was almost a pancake.
It's almost a pancake. God
Okay.
damn it. You can tell Leon is still hurting from the events of Resident Evil 2 Remake and feels jaded by the world around him. He wants his job to be different and be able to make a difference and save someone. By the end, it feels like he gained a bit more hope in himself and the world around him. A great performance. Capcom did the impossible and made Ashley a compelling and likable character. Okay, I never hated OG Ashley, but she was kind of a nothing character that was just the MacGuffin to move the plot forward. She had her moments, but she wasn't great. In the remake, she's 1,000 times better. She has a way more likable personality, she isn't whiny but understandably distressed, she's very helpful during the story and certain gameplay sections, and doesn't come off as a dumb damsel in distress. Sure, she might get kidnapped in the story, but it makes sense and doesn't take away from her character. Her banter with Leon was very cute and wholesome. They have a lot of great moments in cutscenes, and they can even be a bit emotional too. Their dynamic was great, loved the performance and character. If only she was great in general gameplay. I wish that we got the AI of the old Ashley with the character of the remake. Luis Serra gets a lot more depth here than before, and it's a welcome addition. He is still a likable scoundrel who helps out on occasion. He even tags along for a full chapter. He doesn't have the same swagger like the original, but his extended presence on screen and his relationship with Leon and Ashley make him an improvement in my eyes. Leon and Luis have a fun bromance throughout, and when he died, it was quite emotional. Ashley actually gets to react to his death, unlike before, and I like how he serves a very important role in the end to help Leon and Ashley. It feels like he's there with them in spirit. He just feels more important in general, and he will be missed. Ada Wong, unfortunately, is one of the weaker characters in this remake. Her performance, done by Lily Gao, feels very inconsistent at times in my opinion. Sometimes she'll read a line perfectly fine, but often she has the tendency to sound extremely bored.
You don't seem surprised. Interesting. Oh, Leon. You know I don't work in town.
I still sense the romance between her and Leon throughout the game's story, but it's all more or less carried by Leon's own performance and the animation of the cutscenes, with her own performance often feeling lackluster in comparison. I don't know if this was a miscast or if the voice director guided her in the wrong direction, but it feels like something had really gone wrong here. Her role in the story is now smaller than before, with other characters filling in for her in certain sections. It does seem like she has less of a presence in the remake compared to the original. I do enjoy when she's on screen, but I wish we got to see more. Hopefully we'll get to see more in a Separate Ways DLC. I hope Lily Gao is doing okay and isn't turned off from doing more voice acting. Just because her performance wasn't great doesn't mean she deserves the harassment she got. That's unacceptable. There's a fine line between constructive criticism and just being a dick. At the moment, I don't think this is necessarily the role for her, but maybe she'll eventually grow into the role with the Separate Ways DLC when it comes out. I wish her all the best in the role as she continues, but this is one of my least favourite iterations of the elusive sexy spy. The villains overall are fine, but most of them pale in comparison to their original iterations. Now, I'm not saying that these villains were the best written or the most compelling, but god damn they were memorable. They were cheesy and funny, and they had a lot of great banter with Leon. As for their remake counterparts, well, Mendez is fine. I never found him that memorable in the original, but I do wish that they actually called him Big Cheese, instead of it just being an achievement. He does well enough to serve his purpose. Salazar is a massive downgrade. He doesn't have nearly as much screen time with Leon as before, and comes off as a generic creepy villain instead of anything of substance. Before, Salazar and the main villain Sadler himself would talk to Leon on his radio multiple times, which would lead to a lot of memorable moments, and it kept fueling the Bond villain-esque rivalry with Leon.
I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
Just an overall downgrade. I will admit though, it was hilarious when Leon shot him in the face mid-villain speech.
Bestowed with lore settlers.
You talk too much.
But that was funny. That was funny.
You vulgar, utterly uncivilized mongrel.
Sadler is good, but he comes in way too late to leave much of an impression. He only starts showing up in chapter 14 of 16. And bar a few hallucinations and dream sequences, that's all we get. Before, Sadler would show up throughout the game, starting at the church where you rescue Ashley, and even shows up at the castle to kill Luis. That honour goes to Krauser now. Now, in the remake, he does come off as a more believable cult leader, but at the expense of not being as memorable a character. You get to see some of his family history, which is actually pretty cool, so I will give the game that. If he had more screen time, I would have enjoyed this version of him a lot more. as they had the right idea, just not enough screen time to make him great. I saved Krauser for last, as he's the best villain of the bunch. Instead of being Wesker's lackey, he's now a disillusioned soldier who wants revenge for what the US government did to his squad. He also served as Leon's mentor instead of just being a peer, which adds a bit more intrigue to their dynamic. Their rivalry before felt like a dick measuring contest, while in the remake it's more personal and gritty. I am confused on whether or not he actually is working for Wesker or not, as it's never stated. I kinda wish that he still was, because that would mean that he would interact with Ada, and I found their interactions before really interesting and a different change of pace. I think I prefer his original voice, but his new one is good too. It just comes off a bit more natural in the original. Still, I can't complain, as he's by far the best villain of the roster. In terms of music, I think it's very solid. It's on a similar level of enjoyment for me like the original. The updated versions of OG tracks stuck out to me way more than I thought. There's some new atmospheric tracks like the Great Hall and the Island Caves that I thoroughly enjoyed listening to. I liked how the OST is mixing both new and old tracks throughout the game. Obviously the most important tracks stay similar to before, but the updated tracks don't feel intrusive. I always got to mention this, but the save room theme is good, but not brilliant. The save room themes of the original classic are iconic and stick out in my brain whenever I think of save room themes. The new one is more understated and atmospheric. It sort of fades into the background, which is a shame. The best track of the game is by far the shooting range bonus round track. What an absolute banger. Post-game unlocks are pretty much the same as every other game from Resident Evil 2 Remake onwards. I mean in terms of structure. You unlock stuff by doing challenges like complete the game on the hardest difficulty, never using a healing item, only pistols, you get the point. Rewards range from unlockable guns, the returning ones being the hand cannon, which still packs a punch, although it doesn't feel as powerful, at least in my experience. There's the infinite rocket launcher, which needs no explanation. The name kind of speaks for itself. The primal knife, which is the original knife, can be upgraded to be infinite, which leads to a lot of fun parrying. The Chicago typewriter is really shit compared to the original. It's fine, but it's only viable when it's got infinite ammo, and that's if you can deal with the god-awful range and ridiculously piss-poor damage. Besides weapons, there's costumes. Leon can relive the glory days of being a gangster, while Ashley becomes a tank in her night outfit. You can also finally wear the jacket the entire game, which makes me a very happy man. Unfortunately, the rest of the costumes are DLC, which is really shitty in my opinion. They should have been in the base game. Capcom has consistently done this since Resident Evil 2 Remake. It's not a deal breaker, but something to note if you want to get more costumes. There's headgear that can be applied to any costume, with pretty amusing results. And some of them have bonuses in-game, like infinite ammo. Although I'd rather be wearing dog ears than cat ears for infinite ammo. Sorry, I'm a dog person, can't help it. The rest of the rewards are just models that you can view, which is neat, but something I'll only glance through a handful of times to see ballistics, am I right? Jiggle physics have evolved too far. We need to stop, please. Then there's just the concept art for the art enthusiasts out there. Rewards are solid enough, although I wish that we got more guns and costumes in the base game. I'll also mention that they added microtransactions post-launch, which means that you can buy tickets to upgrade your guns just for a small price, but still, it's kind of stupid that you can pay to progress through the game. Mercenaries got added in later as an update, and it's very similar to other versions of the mode. Kill waves of enemies within a time limit while making sure to get combos for high scores. The biggest change was that each playable character has their own cool ability called Mayhem Mode. Leon gets increased damage, Luis gets dynamite which can't harm him, Krauser gets to use his special powers, and the legend himself, Hunk, gets infinite ammo. Hunk is beyond broken, but I love him. The character roster is excellent. Well, besides for the absence of Ada and Wesker, but hopefully they will be added in later. The maps themselves are fine, just 3 locations from the village, castle and island. There's no achievements for this mode, so it's only worth doing for your own personal high score instead of trying to indulge your inner completionist. This might be my favourite version of the mode, and that's saying something. We've got a lot of good mercenary modes over the years, but this might have been the most fun for me. Although it could just be recency bias, still, it's a great time. I don't know where to put this, but I just want to mention it quickly that I think the UI could have been better. The original game's UI is iconic and memorable. It was dirty and distinct. Also, having Leon there with whatever gun you had was a nice touch that is sadly missed. The new game's UI is just basic modern design, nothing stands out about it, it's just functional. I'm nitpicking, but these details matter to me. Oh well, it's not the end of the world, I guess. The game is still fantastic. One last thing to mention before I wrap up is that the game actually got me into speedrunning. I remember beating the game in under 4 hours and I thought to myself, oh, it's on. I was addicted for weeks. I finally understood its appeal. Finding out ways to beat the game fast in ways the devs didn't intend was hilarious and interesting. I find it hard to go back to the normal way of playing it now. I'd recommend giving it a go once and see what you think. I had to take a break from it though, because unfortunately I have stupid things like responsibilities. God. I also didn't want to suffer from burnout. If you're curious, I ran the no major glitches category on standard, and my fastest time as of recording this video is 2 hours, 22 minutes and 56 seconds. Overall, this game is a fantastic remake. It builds on so many things from the original and adds a lot of brand new content that doesn't feel bloated or intrusive. It's a very respectful remake. It doesn't tarnish the original game's legacy. Despite all my praise, I think it's slightly worse than the original. Now this might be nostalgia talking out my ass, but I still love the original game. I have been playing it for 7 years and I'm not bored of it yet. The gameplay flow of the original is so addicting and the charm and ambience hasn't been topped. Also, the cut content and microtransactions from the remake does also factor into why I prefer the original, but only by a little bit. Thankfully, the original game is still widely available, so if you don't like the remake, you can still play the original. I recommend playing both, of course, because they're both fantastic for their own reasons. I'd probably rank this as my second favourite Resident Evil game under the original, with something like a 9.5 out of 10, something close to my 10 out of 10 score for the original. I will say one more thing. For a game that didn't need to exist whatsoever, Capcom did a pretty damn good job. Now Capcom, I want you to either remake Code Veronica or stop with the remakes and make Resident Evil 9. Pretty please.